Um, yeah, well, that's great. Maybe people right now.
Hi, Bob. Oh. Hi, Chris Leonard. I just realized one thing, which is I don't know how to make people a co-host, but certainly someone will tell me how to do that.
Yeah.
I see we have a lot of attendees here. I'm just going to give us a few more moments for our committee to join, and then we'll get started. Chris, you didn't have any problem with the Zoom link, I guess?
No.
Good.
First time I'm using it, but it's pretty simple.
I love that this is the first time you're using it 3 months into COVID. But this is my first time hosting, so I've been to a million of them, but I've never hosted.
I've been using FaceTime for a lot of stuff, so.
Yeah, a lot of people have. Everyone who is attending, I'm just going to give us till 6:35 to let people from our committee and the community board join in, and at 6:35 we'll start. That's about as far as my patience goes.
How are you otherwise?
Oh, look, people are joining. This is great. I see Adam, I see Jessica. And I'll have everyone introduce themselves once we get started. And there's Wayne. Hi, Wayne.
Hi, Susanna. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you.
Signing you all in as we sit here. I wonder if Tom will be able to join. He's had difficulty joining Zoom meetings, so we shall see. Jessica, nice to see you, although you're Adam. Nice to see you. So let's see, we're missing still Rachel, I don't know what her plan is. Kathy, Keen, and Tom. I'll give them 2 more minutes and then we'll go. I know that Keen was planning on being here. And I don't know about Kathy. And I don't know about Rachel. And Tom has been able to join some Zoom meetings and others not. So I hope he can join. He's had some difficulty working with it. I can understand. Okay, and Darren Block, you're here. That's great. All right, let's get started. To everybody, welcome. This is the CB2, Manhattan CB2 Social Services Committee meeting. I'm very thrilled that we have as many attendees as we do. I see 76 attendees, so we're looking forward to a lively discussion. The first thing I want to do is introduce the members of our committee. So I am Susanna Aaron. I am the chair. Chris?
Hi, I'm Christopher Leonard, and I'm a public member on the committee.
Wayne?
I am Wayne Quadler. I'm on CB2.
Adam, you want to? Adam? Oh, you're frozen. Oh dear. Adam Zeldin is a member of our committee. Jessica, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us who you are?
Sure. I'm Jessica Aaron. I'm a public member of the committee.
Great. And Bob Gormley is our district manager, and Carter Booth will be joining us. He is the chair of Community Board 2. So tonight we have 2 agenda topics. The first is we're going to hear from Greenwich House, which is one of the major social service providers in our district for senior services especially, although not only. And we're going to hear from them about an outreach program that they have initiated, spurred by COVID, but actually with great utility going forward to create social capitalism, social capital rather, and connecting neighbors to one another. And it's a wonderful volunteer effort as well. And then the second topic is going to be a presentation from Project Renewal, which will be talking about a shelter it plans to open on West 11th Street, a shelter for homeless women that it plans to open on West 11th Street. A couple of things. So we're going to start with the first topic and then the second. There's a lot of people in attendance here, but I'm going to have to end this meeting at 8:45. I find that at a certain point, people just get too grouchy and too tired for it to yield any productive results. So in anticipation of that, I just want to manage your expectations to all the attendees. The way it will work with each of these topics is that we'll hear a presentation. I'll ask some questions, our committee will ask some questions, and then we will open it up to attendees and we'll ask you guys to raise your hands. And Adam Zeldin, my wonderful colleague, is going to help by calling on people. And then we're going to ask you to limit your questions to 2 minutes. So that we can get through as many people as we can. And for those of whom, for those who are not able to provide public input in this meeting, I know how frustrating that is, but I will invite you to send us an email at CB2. It's info@cb2manhattan.org, but if you go on our website, you can easily see how to contact us, and I promise you that our committee will be reading every single email that we get. We're going to end the meeting at 8:45, as I said, so that we have time as a committee to have a a business session and talk about this. And another member of our committee has joined, Kathy Sullivan. Do you want to say hello? You're muted, and I'm gonna rename you and just ask if you can unmute yourself and say hello. All right. I think you're having a hard time with the mute, so Kathy is with us. All right, so let's start. I'm going to call on Darren Block, who is the president of Greenwich House. And let's see how I do this. So I'm going to allow you to talk. And there you are. You can show us your video if you want to. If you need to share a screen, you'll let me know. I'm not exactly sure how to do that.
That's good. It's not inviting me to share video, but happy if this works for you.
It's not inviting you to share video.
Sorry.
All right. Does anyone know how to do that? Let's see. Why is it not inviting you to share video? That really stinks. And I don't have Josh Thompson on to help me with this. Adam, you don't know how to allow people to share video, do you?
I'm actually here.
I'm investigating.
All right. Okay. Anyway, Darren, let's get started, and Josh is going to try to solve this problem.
Yeah, you got us halfway there, and trust me, I'm nothing to look at, so you probably get the better of this anyway. Thanks, Susanna, and a big thanks to you and Carter and Bob. You guys have been pretty supportive of Greenwich House and the work we've done historically and recently. And you in particular, I think, have found some real interest in this passion project that we launched a couple months ago. This is actually a little bit of a refresher on a topic that came up at a social service CB2 meeting maybe 2 or 3 months ago. When COVID started, Greenwich House, which folks might know, has a pretty rich array of services and supports for seniors and older adults. We started to get a lot of inquiries, and we started to ask ourselves, how can we support this community?
Did you just disappear? Why are you?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, nice job.
There you go. Thank you, Josh.
Well done. So when COVID began, we started to really buckle down on this question we were getting from both our staff, trying to figure out how we could further support this constituency that was being called, directed to stay kind of in isolation. It was a community that, as we all know, anyone who's followed senior services, was dealing with some severe isolation challenges before COVID, and COVID, as we certainly were directing our older adults to stay quarantining and isolated in place, exacerbated the problem. And then there was an outpouring of a lot of folks wanting to do some kind of service and good during this time from a safe distance. And so this idea, not revolutionary, but this idea of utilizing phone calls and phone outreach was something that we began to pursue. We weren't alone. Lots of others were trying to explore this, but what we were trying to develop was a system that wouldn't just provide for a one-time phone call and outreach on it, but would allow a volunteer to make a series of outreach calls, identify a senior who wanted and needed some kind of ongoing connection and support to someone, just a friendly call, and a way to kind of perpetuate that. And so in that scheme, this idea of the neighborhood network came about. Several local elected officials had expressed interest. Chief among them was Brad Lander, someone who I'd worked with in the past, who's a Brooklyn-based council person, who had been also thinking about these questions. And we started to see some other service providers developing and thinking about the idea. So everybody from the New York City Engagement Table, which works with public-oriented outreach campaigns, had raised their hand as wanting to try to help. We had partners from Google, we had partners from several local corporations, and we had, most importantly, New York Community Trust stepped up with a small startup and planning grant for the exercise. Long story short, after probably about 8 or 9 months of building systems, stress testing ideas, we launched about 5 weeks ago in its kind of early beta form, which is this process that allows volunteers to come in and begin making these cold calls to older adults in a catchment area that we specified. And as they're making those calls, they are just general check-in calls. We're following DFTA and some other health guidelines in terms of asking some basics about access to food, access to medicine, need for delivery, any other more acute needs. And
DFTA, so for anyone who doesn't know, is the Department for the Aging of the city. Sorry, go on.
thank you. And the idea really was that we weren't expecting these volunteers to become caseworkers suddenly, but part of the value of the engagement was that Greenwich House was sitting at the center of this hub of outreach. And so that if an older adult did come back with a real severe need, we had case managers, social workers, and others that could work directly with that identified senior. So the way this neighbor network has started to develop is Greenwich House has developed this outreach program here in the West Village. To give folks a sense of the catchment area that we've carved out, it's roughly Assemblywoman Glick's Assembly District. So it's a little bit beyond Greenwich House's kind of conventional area. It goes a little bit east and a little bit further south. But it seemed like what we could kind of grab hold of. It actually also mirrors community CB2's catchment area. And so we were launching this in Manhattan, and a group, Heights and Hills, which is also a senior service organization, was launching a similar project in Brooklyn, working with Councilman Lander and his team to generate volunteers. And then Heights and Hills was this service hub in the event that more acute needs arose. So that's the idea. That's what we've developed. I'll give a couple just quick data points and then happy to answer questions or reflections on it. Just in the last 5 weeks or so of activities, we've trained just about 60 volunteers in the approach. We've made a little over 800 phone calls and outreach. We've connected with 30 or 40 seniors who want some kind of ongoing outreach. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, only about 5 or so have had some real acute need that needed us to delve into directly. And so I think what this revealed, just to give folks a little context on our diagnosis of that, is the good thing is a lot of the seniors, and I've made a bunch of these calls myself as well, a lot of the older adults and seniors we're reaching out to are doing well, so that's a good sign, right? That's that they have a network, they have a family, a neighbor, a friend who's staying in touch with them. They're getting the nutritional needs they have, they're getting some kind of social needs they have. And so for those calls, it's generally just been a friendly, hey, we're just calling, checking in. Senior says, we're all good. Move on to your next call, but thanks for the outreach. And, and I think what we're seeing is of those 30 or 40 seniors, those who are raising their hand and saying we want a recurring call, we're really tapping into this very much an invisible group of older adults who truly are feeling like they don't have a connection and a resource. And so while the percentage is maybe under what we had expected coming in, I think the fact that we're seeing those numbers consistently across who we're reaching out to is really driving, I think, a sharp need that we're seeing. And it goes to Susanna, what you said before, that probably well beyond COVID, this is outreach that's probably quite important for us to figure out how to scale and continue. I'll leave.
This was in the works before COVID. It was a little late to get up and running during COVID because you had a bunch of technical issues and needed to really set this up as a successful interactive model. But you've been using it during COVID, I know, because I was a volunteer. And this goes well beyond the membership of Greenwich House. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you for that. So it goes beyond the membership of Greenwich House in 2 ways. One, when COVID-19 struck and really sort of paralyzed our city, what we started to do at Greenwich House was do outreach to the 1,800 or so seniors that are part of our roster, our census of older adults in the area who come in for some kind of regular service or programming. We were using our existing staff. We redirected some other staff that were being underutilized because other programs had paused. But we knew that there was this need well beyond those 1,800 members who we knew and we were able to capture. And to your point, so that was kind of the genesis of it. And yeah, there were two real pain points that we discovered in setting it up. One, it was actually not that challenging to find a list of several thousand older adults in our area with a phone number associated with it. Well, what did become incredibly challenging was how to create systems that allowed a caller to almost do a phone bank type system. You do a training, we set you up with a platform that allows you to make this rotation of random calls to a set area, and then take any of those positive calls that want recurring calls and transition that to another platform that it would allow a senior to make calls and capture that data and information. And that was a much more challenging tech infrastructure than we had expected.
I want to commend you on doing that. I think it's something that I would think could be replicated and scaled up throughout the city. I want to ask if any members of our committee want to ask a question. How am I doing this?
I also just want to note that Julie Ehrman, who's a member of Councilman Lander's team in Brooklyn, and it was a real sort of driver of a lot of the thinking, a lot of the work, also is joining us and is on this call. So if there's questions about different catchment areas that we're working right now or other vision calls, Julia can certainly join me on some of those responses.
Thanks, Karen. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm a floating voice, but I'm here, and thank you for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for joining, Julia.
Sure.
I think that Keen Berger has a question. Keen, would you like to unmute yourself? You need to, let me see if I can unmute you. Ask to unmute.
Okay, and I
There you go.
Yeah, I would like to hear the statistics more clearly. How many seniors are over 65? Is that what you're doing? How many live in the catchment area overall? How many of them have phones? How many of them have, in terms of percentages or in terms of numbers? And then of the calls, what I'm hearing, I think, is about 5% want follow-up. And what I'm hearing, is this right? About 1% really are in trouble. Is that right? You've already said this, I know, but I just want to hear it.
No, I'm happy to tease it out. I know I ran through the updates pretty quickly, and great quick math on that, Keen. Yeah, I think those percentages that you outlined are about right. On your first, in terms of acute need, recurring calls and the like. In terms of the catchment area, about 15,000 seniors, and I believe we did 60 and over as our cut for outreach in this general area. So the story to take from that is we've got a lot more work that we can do in this area. Part of the reason I'm thankful for Susanna and the community board for continuing to raise this topic is because we're trying to raise awareness that there's a great need for volunteers, and it's a fairly low barrier to kind of come in and do this. We're only asking volunteers to commit to finding one recurring call. If they want to find 2 or 3 seniors, that's great. But really, we're asking for just pair with one. In terms of other statistics, what can I? Oh, you had asked about older adults with phones. Unclear. I don't have that data point. And I'll give you a little insight as to the data we do have. So the New York City Engagement Table, which is a nonprofit that builds up using public information, public data. They build off of a voter file and then add layers of additional available information to build this fairly robust list of New Yorkers. But there are limitations on what they have, right? This is not a 100% census of everybody in every building on every block in every neighborhood. It's information that's culled from different public available sources, the voter file probably being the largest of what that is. And so the connection to how many we have in the cohort that we've carved out versus how many exist, I don't have an exact answer for that. And on the point of how many of the seniors we're not reaching that don't have phones or some other issue, I don't have an answer for that one either. I don't know, Julie, I don't know if your exploration in Brooklyn has given any more insight into some of those.
our data in Brooklyn is really different because with Heights and Hills, we're working with, so far, we're just calling people who are on their waiting list for services. So these are all people who have been approved for services through Heights and Hills. So it's a relatively high need group.
I'm sorry, Julie, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. Just identify yourself and tell us what Heights and Hills is.
I'm sorry. I thought Darren explained.
No, that's quite all right.
That's fine.
Right.
Sorry, my name is Julia. I am the Land Use and Budget Director in Councilman Brad Lander's office, and I have been working also on volunteer management through the COVID crisis. So I am new to volunteer sort of management and this whole world, but I've learned a lot from Darren and from working with Heights and Hills, which is a social service provider that works in many neighborhoods in Brooklyn. They also operate a senior center, but they work a lot with homebound older adults as well. And they have a wait list for case management that has grown a lot over the course of this crisis. So I think they typically have about 50 people on the wait list, and right now they have 650 people on the wait list.
Whoa.
So we have prioritized the volunteers in Brooklyn to make calls to the people who are on the Heights and Hills wait list. And those people have all been kind of screened by Heights and Hills and are eligible for their services. So we have much higher rates of immediate needs in those calls.
Yeah,
So
and I'd say,
Populations.
oh, sorry, Susanna, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, so it's different populations, different circumstances, but we see a lot of utility for this going forward.
Completely. And what I was going to say, also bouncing off of Keen's, the reflection on this was, we in launching this project, I think it happened serendipitously, but I think it's worked out that because we have these two kind of different areas, we're able to start to see what that model looks like in an area where, I think we'd all generally agree, while CB2 has needs, individuals with needs and pockets of need, it's a different type of demographic landscape than other corners of our city with much, much deeper needs, levels of historic underinvestment and poverty levels and the such. And so it's definitely been an interesting lens into the relative reactions that we get from older adults that we're reaching out to. But for us, part of what we wanted to do was test a system that, hoping other senior service organizations raise their hand and say, we'd love to bring that infrastructure to our catchment area. And we're modeling at least two different approaches to how to do it.
And one of the fault lines of that I think has emerged is I think for the Greenwich House calls in Manhattan, we sort of focused more on the friendly call outreach, sort of
Isolation questions.
Yeah, isolation questions and the relationships that form, and that exists also with the Heights and Hills calls, but they are Heights and Hills there are a lot more questions about immediate needs and food and medicine, and that is kind of more on the forefront of what they're following up with.
Are there any other questions from our committee? I see there's one question from the public. So Chris, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know how many volunteers that are available if the senior has a primary language that's not English.
Oh, that's a good question. Have you guys made any provisions for people who are not English speaking?
They've been limited, but we're trying to do better and more. And we've done that in a couple ways. I think in the initial outreach calls that are done, we try to identify, and when we looked at our area, and it was, by the way, to the point earlier, the demographics that we saw in the West Village versus in the Heights and Hills cohort in Brooklyn was very different in terms of, again, this is not scientific, but it's the best data that was available from New York City Engagement Table. I think we looked at any percentage of populations above maybe 5% to see what were the language connections, and that might be a little bit off, might have been 10%. But what we really found was largely English with a little bit of Spanish, which is obviously not to say that they're not other language needs. And if someone makes that outreach, we're able to try to find someone with that access. But it's been, I'll be frank, it's been fairly limited right now, Chris, in terms of the volunteer population we have in terms of that language access. Julia, I'm not sure if you've had any different luck.
But I can say also from being a volunteer that you can I'd isolate that, and that at least will give you a sense, I mean, in terms of our district, which is what we're most focused on, in a sense of what the needs are in terms of languages. So that's helpful. Is there anyone else from our committee who has a question?
Julia, did you have an answer to that a little bit?
Oh, I mean, I don't have that much more to add, except that I think it's something we need to work to improve. And for Heights and Hills, we've added a question in the form where volunteers can mark if there are other language there, if it's not an English speaking household. And in some cases, we've been able to rematch people specifically who speak Spanish with volunteers who speak Spanish. But it's also, I mean, I think we're also just working right now with kind of self-selected English-speaking populations. Like the people who've reached out to Heights and Hills have initiated their own outreach to Heights and Hills for services, so they already know a lot about those people. And I think if we expand the program, we'll need to have
that.
more.
It came up quite a bit, Chris, when we were talking about the infrastructure early on. And I think it's one of a few things right now that's folks were sensitive to that being a gap in us being able to do this just yet, which is not to say we have a great answer for it just yet, but it's definitely on awareness. I mean, I think the other element just for this group to be aware of is we had identified what are other kind of pro-social promotions or awareness that we could share during these calls. And so, you know, there've been promotions of census and filling out the census and ways to do that. In the last couple of weeks, we've included references to some of the social justice and Black Lives Matters materials that we've all been referring, whether in our own organizations and with others, as just these are topics that are a part of the conscious of our communities. And we want to, as we're making these kind of friendly connections, we want to be able to sort of do a little bit of additional social good. But it's a good spot. It's the right spot for us to keep doing better on it.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful vehicle. If no one else on our committee has questions, I wanted to call on someone from the public. Susan Colker, do you have talking permitted? Susan Colker, wait, hold on a second, sorry. Oh, can you unmute yourself, Susan Colker? And ask your question. I have to ask, oh, ask to unmute. I'm asking you to unmute. Asking you to unmute. Are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, well, that didn't work. So here's what we're gonna do. Susan, if you have a question, I'll invite you to ask it in an email, and we'll do it that way.
Put it in the chat, right? Put it in the chat.
No, actually, I think we're not going to use the chat tonight because we've got a lot of people, and I think that when it's a lot of people, it gets really messy and it's really hard to watch. Okay, in that case, I think we're going to move on. I wanted to thank Greenwich House for coming. I want to thank you guys for doing this. I mean, I just think that one of the most difficult things is knowing who the community is and knowing who is isolated and who needs company as well as services. So I think that this is a really great tool. And if anyone wants to volunteer, how should they do that?
Thank you. I was just about to close on that point. If anybody wants to volunteer or even just see a little bit more about what we're doing, you can go to theneighborhoodnetwork.org. Again, it's theneighbornetwork.org, and you can see more about how to volunteer and some of what we're doing. I also just want to give a shout out to Brad Hoyleman's team and Jacob Priley, who has been a help in being a volunteer captain for us in our area, along with some of our team from Greenwich House. So Susanna, thanks again for the
thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you at another meeting. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I'm
guys.
going to now disable your voices because we're going to move on to our next topic. Hold on a second. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Everyone has to bear with me because this is the first time I'm hosting a meeting. And so I'm a little I got a bit of 2 left feet. Okay, so we're moving on to our second topic, which is going to be a presentation by Project Renewal, and Leilani Irvin of the Department of Social Services, who I'm soon going to enable to talk, is going to do a presentation. Just so you know the run of show, Project Renewal will do a presentation. Then I will ask some questions that I think are top of mind for a lot of people. We will open to our committee to ask questions, and then we will open it to the public. Adam Zeldin, whom you can see here with the headphones, is going to help me by calling on people, so that, because there's going to be a lot going on at the same time. I ask you a few things. One, please keep your questions and your points succinct. There's a lot of people here. I see 87 attendees, so if the briefer we are, the more people can speak. Raise your hands. Limit your points to 2 minutes. I think Adam's going to try to time you guys. And please be courteous. I mean, you know, everyone's got good points and good questions, but let's be courteous. And since I am quite sure, I don't know that everyone here wants to say something. I'm sure a lot of you are here just to listen. But if you don't get a chance to say something tonight, please understand. We're going to stop this meeting at 8:45 so that our committee can have a business session and try to end at 9 o'clock. You're all welcome to listen to that, but we won't take public input during that. And again, if you're not able to make your input by voice tonight, I really welcome you to send it by email to the community board, CB2 Manhattan. I promise you we will read every single email that we get. So I have to now, hold on a second. I have to allow some people to talk. Leilani Irvin and Eric Rosenbaum. Eric Rosenbaum, allowed to talk. And Jody Rudin, allowed to talk. And Caden Grinnell, allowed to talk. And Charles Mulham. Sorry. Charles. Okay, great. So, and Josh, are you able to make these people all visible?
I can do that, Susanna.
Okay, Carter, thank you. Carter Booth, whom you all see here, the chair of Community Board 2. Welcome, Carter. Thanks for joining us. I think that Leilani is going to be the first to speak, and then Leilani, you can introduce your folks. If you need to share a screen, let us know, and Carter will tell me how we do that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi everyone, this is Leilani Irvin. I'm the Manhattan Borough Director for the Department, oh, there I go. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, hello everybody, my name is Leilani Irvin. I'm the Manhattan Borough Director for the Department of Social Services. I just want to start by thanking Community Board 2 and all of the board members for inviting DHS and Project Renewal to come before the board and community members to share our shelter plan for 27 West 11th Street. We have Project Renewal on the line, and I'll allow them to, you know, speak about the services that they've been providing and talk a little bit more in depth about this project. But first, I kind of wanted to preface this conversation and just give a general overview of the agency and give a quick snapshot picture of how we got here and how we're siting shelters. And so I won't take too much of your time because I hear you have a hard stop. But I'll try to be as brief and quick to the points as fast as possible. Under this administration, Mayor Bill de Blasio and our Commissioner Steve Banks conducted a 90-day review. And in that review, they did an assessment and an overview of how we were operating inside of shelter, as well as doing an overview of all of the social services that we provide everyday New Yorkers. And we've made some modifications and some changes, policy changes. And one of the outcomes of this plan was for us to close out of commercial hotels, pull out of commercial hotel settings and cluster unit settings. Commercial hotels, in short, are not a good fit for any of our clients. In particular, families with children is who occupy a good majority of our commercial hotel units. And it's just not a good suitable fit for clients. There's not enough space on site for social service programming. They don't have cooking facilities and more. And so we want to get out of these units by 2023. But in order for us to close down and pull out of these locations, a part of the plan is to open up 90 new purpose-built shelter facilities. And in doing so, we're looking to only identify high-quality, top-notch shelter providers, such as the one you'll all hear from in a little bit, Project Renewal. And with the plan also, the agency and the commissioner have agreed that it's best for us to ensure that we're keeping everyday New Yorkers who's coming into our system closer to their community and support networks. And so with this 90-day review and with this Turning the Tide plan, the ultimate goal is to keep folks closer to their support networks and houses of worship, doctor's office, etc., by creating a borough-based approach. So this plan is very borough-based, keeping folks closer to their support networks within their borough. And so this particular shelter site that you'll hear more in depth from Project Renewal, and you'll hear more about the services that will be provided here at this location, which, by the way, will be for single adult women with a capacity of 90. So there'll be 90 beds here. And the women who will be coming to this site will be, this is an employee or employable. They'll be employed or they'll be employable women who will be coming to this location. And so I'll turn it over to Project Renewal, but just kind of wanted to give folks a quick snapshot of how we are moving forward with the way we are siting shelters throughout the city of New York. With this particular shelter location and any shelter we make an announcement on, that will also come with what's called a community advisory board. A community advisory board is comprised of several community stakeholders that we identify by way of working with community board and elected official representatives. We create what's called a community.
Lost you. What happened to her?
I believe she disappeared, but
She
I believe she disappeared.
No, she's muted. Muted. Unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself?
I don't see her at all, but
I see her, but I see there. Now she's unmuted. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Now
Yes, now we can.
yes,
So sorry. I don't know how that happened. I didn't touch anything.
that's okay. We were just saying that all these sites will have community advisory boards who will be made up of local stakeholders.
Correct. And and what I love most about the community advisory board meetings, one is it just creates a flow of communication between the site and community. We've seen some success with our community advisory boards in other areas and throughout the borough, where we have community members who've created awesome new partnerships for our community, our clients. There's job opportunities that's been created. There's a lot of community organizations that, volunteer with our providers and offer supports and services to our clients. We've had yoga instructors volunteer, artists volunteer to teach our clients how to paint through art therapy programming and more. And so we look forward to these types of community advisory boards being set up, but also to ensure that there's some form of communication between the site and community. We stand firm and really believe, as well as Project Renewal, really has an impressive track record in doing so and ensuring that their community engagement with community is strong. And through creating community advisory board, it's a great pipeline and a way of ensuring that there's a constant flow of communication and transparency between not just the agency, but them as a provider and community members at large. And so whenever the site becomes live, in which the projection of when this site should be, when we should be completed with this project, is a little far out. We have about a 2-year projection, but when it does become live, that is something that I'll work with the community board and other elected official representatives to identify who those stakeholders would be to be a part of the community advisory board. for this particular location. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to Jody and Eric, who's the CEO of Project Renewal, and to allow themselves to just expound more on who they are as a provider and to speak more in depth about the services that will be provided at this particular location.
One thing, Project Renewal, do you guys need to share a deck or a screen, or are we doing this just verbally?
There is a presentation that after I'm done talking, we will share.
Okay, great. So let's hear from you then.
That
Hi,
is
Eric.
assuming
Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Hi there. So I'm Eric Rosenbaum. I'm the president and CEO of Project Renewal. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Project Renewal is, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jody, who is our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, who will share some details on the program itself and on the shelter, along with Kaidan Grinnell, who is the Vice President of Programs, and Charlie Mullum, who is our Director of Security. By way of introduction, I've been at the helm of Project Renewal for just under 2 years. Before that, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Women in Need for a decade, which is the city's largest provider of shelter for families with kids. And this is kind of my 4th career, having been a biologist and an executive with Colgate-Palmolive. So I've kind of done a bunch of different things. And this actually is the best job I've had in my life. So, I'm thrilled to be here. For those of you who don't know Project Renewal, it's a 54-year-old organization. It's one of the oldest and largest homeless service agencies in New York. We serve over 14,000 people a year. We house about 1,000 of them in shelters, in 7 shelters throughout Manhattan, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. We have another 1,000 people who live with us permanently in buildings that we own that provide supportive services. So we're a pretty significant provider of housing, really the entire spectrum of housing. We also are one of the largest providers of healthcare to homeless New Yorkers. We have licensed healthcare clinics in several of our shelters. We operate mobile medical vans that travel throughout the city, providing healthcare to underserved areas. If you're familiar with the soup kitchen at the Church of the Holy Apostles at 28th and 9th, our medical van provides healthcare outside that so that people who come there to eat can also get healthcare. And we are one of the largest providers of food to homeless New Yorkers, making and delivering over 3 million meals a year, not only in our own shelters, but to many other shelter providers. And in fact, we operate a catering company called City Beat Kitchens. You can look them up, citybeatkitchens.org. And when you're able to have gatherings again, you can actually have your event catered by City Beat Kitchens. City Beat Kitchens is one of our premier employment programs also. We have a 6-month culinary arts training program that started in 1995 and has since then provided almost 2,000 people with certification and the ability to get good careers in food service, the kind that have promotion potential, that pay more than minimum wage, that have benefits, and give people a sense of a future. And many of the graduates of that program actually became employed with us, helping us to build this social purpose enterprise that feeds so many New Yorkers. We also have another workforce development program called Next Step, which works with people who are homeless, either living in shelter or not, helping them become employment ready and helping them find jobs. And in fact, I'm very pleased that when COVID-19 hit, not surprisingly, our clients were among the first to lose their jobs. And we reached out to all of the alumni of our programs to find out who was still employed or who had lost their jobs. And we've been able to secure employment for 100 of our graduates in the last 3 months in the areas of the employment market that are growing. So we've really stayed close to the needs of our clients, past and present. And we're very excited to be able to offer a specialized shelter, relatively small in scale, for women who are either working but don't earn enough to afford an apartment, or who are ready to work and willing to work and need help with soft skills and other training that we can provide them. So now I'm going to turn this over to Jody that will give you the details of the project. And of course, we're here to be the neighborhood's partner. And Jody will talk about how we do that in the neighborhoods we work in, and also hear from Kadon and from Charlie. So Jody, off to you.
Thank you, Eric, and good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. I wish we were meeting in person, but I suppose that's for a different time. As Leilani mentioned, I am the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Project Renewal. I've been in my role for almost 3 years, and also relevant to this discussion, I spent 13 years of my career at the city's Department of Homeless Services and left 5 years ago as Deputy Commissioner of Adult Services, overseeing the adult shelter system, the adult family shelter system, and the provision of services for people sleeping on the streets. As has been mentioned, we are planning to open a 90-bed women's shelter at 27 West 11th Street in about 2 years. I want to offer a few quick reflections about why Project Renewal chose this project, why we think it's really meaningful, why it fits with our mission that Eric talked about. And then I'm going to hand it over to Kadon Grinnell, our Vice President of Programs, who's going to talk more nuts and bolts about what's going to go on in the building every day in terms of our services and programming. I'm going to try to be exceedingly brief because we really want to save the lion's share of the time to hear from you around questions, concerns, ideas. It is our intention to partner with you, and we are coming to you deliberately years out from opening so that all of your voices can be incorporated into and can help inform the program that we run. So I'll say a few things briefly. The first of which is I want to answer the question of what it means to operate a women's employment shelter. So the single adult shelter system that DHS operates, and they run some shelters directly themselves with city workers, but for most of the shelters, they contract out to nonprofit providers like Project Renewal. The single adult shelter system has about 17,000 people in it. And for women, there are 2 points of access entry into the system. One is in Brooklyn, one is in the Bronx. And women enter the shelter system. They go through a fairly brief intake process where they share some basic information about themselves. Then they're sent to what is called an assessment shelter, where they typically spend about 3 weeks. And the Department of Homeless Services gets to know them a bit. They give them a psychiatric evaluation, a psychosocial evaluation, often a medical examination. They get to know who they are as people, what their interests are, what some of their challenges are. And then based on the information that the Department of Homeless Services collects, they assign that client to an appropriate program shelter. And some program shelters have specialized services for folks who are seriously and persistently mentally ill. Some program shelters specialize in substance use disorder services, and some programs specialize in employment services. So we're going to receive clients who are screened by DHS to either be employed or be interested in and not have significant barriers to employment. That means, as a practical matter, that we're not going to be receiving folks who have mental illness or substance use that would preclude them from actively and meaningfully engaging in employment processes. And so that's how we're going to get our clients. We're asked often how long people will stay with us. I wanted to just say there's a lot of transients broadly in the shelter system, but typically that's at the front end of the shelter system. Most people who stay in shelter only stay for a night, but once someone makes it through the intake and assessment process, they generally stay for a little bit over a year. I think the average length of stay right now for single adults is about 15 months. Leilani can correct me if I'm wrong. That often fluctuates through the years, largely dependent on sort of the housing stock on the back end. I know when I was at DHS, it was during the time that the New York 3 supportive housing agreement was struck. So there was an influx of supportive housing into the marketplace. So the average length of stay in shelter was closer to 6 or 9 months. So it changes over time. Right now it's 15 months. And Kate again, will talk in a lot more detail about the provision of services and the services that we're going to provide on site. What I want to talk about for a minute is why Project Renewal chose this project. As Leilani mentioned, the city committed through its Turning the Tide program to open up 90 new shelters. So we get a lot of phone calls from the Department of Homeless Services asking us to run various shelters. And more often than not, just from an organizational capacity standpoint and bandwidth standpoint, we say no to projects. And the reason why we said yes to this one is twofold. One, and I'm drawing a little bit on my experience from working at the Department of Homeless Services here, but also the experience that my colleagues and I have had at Project Renewal operating these programs over the last nearly 55 years. We find that the strongest link to running a successful shelter that gets good outcomes for the clients it serves is the size of the program. And the smaller it is, the more effective it is. And because there's a right to shelter in New York City, and every single adult who shows up at the front door of shelter is going to get a bed, there's constant pressure on the city and DHS to open more shelters and site more shelters. And there's some pressure to do that efficiently, meaning, the larger the shelter, the fewer you have to open. So there is a temptation often to go up to the cap, the maximum allowable capacity of 200. So it's rare to get an opportunity to run a smaller shelter. And when we were offered the opportunity to run this 90-bed shelter, we really wanted to seize upon the opportunity. The other reason why this project is compelling from Project Renewal standpoint is the other 7 Department of Homeless Services shelters that we operate throughout the city are for various specialized populations, including clients with mental illness, substance use disorders. We operate the city's first LGBTQ shelter. We operate a shelter for men who are over the age of 55, but we don't operate a shelter that focuses on employment services and workforce development services. And our mission as an organization has 3 prongs to it. It's really to work with the clients, empower the clients we work with to end their cycle of homelessness through health, homes, and jobs. And Eric talked a bit about the jobs aspect of our mission and our workforce development programming. And operating shelters is also an organizational expertise for Project Renewal, and we haven't married those two yet. So we think the opportunity to bring our workforce development programming expertise into the context of a shelter setting is compelling, and we're looking forward to doing it. As Leilani mentioned, we plan to open in 2022. We have several processes yet to go through with the Department of Homeless Services. We have to negotiate a budget. We have to get an executed contract with them. These things take many, many months. I would estimate that piece of it to probably be anywhere from 6 to 12 months. And then we say about 1 year for construction. Honestly, we expect that the construction period is going to be about 6 to 9 months, but we add into that year another 3+ months for various approvals and sign-offs from the Department of Buildings. So we think we're looking at least 2 years until opening. We want to initiate a robust dialogue with all of you. We want you to inform our programming, and we really want to think about how to be great partners. And Leilani talked about this a little bit in the context of a community advisory board. We have visions of kind of block beautification projects and other ways, really thinking together about how we can, partner in a way that not only enhances our services, but, pays significant attention to your interests and your concerns. So looking forward to a productive discussion tonight and an ongoing discussion over these many, many, many months. And I'm going to turn this over briefly to my colleague, Kaydon Grinnell, our Vice President of Programs, and the shelter director at West 11th Street at the Larchmont will report directly to Kaydon. So Kaydon, I am turning this over to you.
There we go. Sorry, I'm still a little bit technologically challenged. But as Jody mentioned, my name is Kaydon Grinnell, and I'm the Vice President of Programming here at Project Renewal, who will be overseeing this project. I've been with Project Renewal for 10 years, and in that time, I've overseen social service programming for homeless New Yorkers in both the shelter and supportive housing settings, including the launch of New York's first LGBTQ-specific single adult shelter. My experience in working with homeless individuals over the past few years has taught me two really important lessons. First, in order for any of us to be successful, we all depend on support systems and help from our communities, whether that be formal or informal. And second, community support is an essential component of any successful program. So I really want to take a moment just to express my gratitude for CB2's willingness to open discussions around this program, and my sincere hope that this is the first of many to come. To help add some background to the conversation, I'd like to just talk you through our vision for the project and our plans for service delivery before handing it over to Charles Mulham to talk a little bit about our security measures. First, each client that walks through the doors of the Larchmont after completing their assessment period, as Jody alluded to at DHS intake shelters, will be met by a residential aide from our operations team to complete what's essentially an introduction package. During this initial meeting, the women will be engaged about their immediate, intermediate, and long-term needs, and also cover expectations of behavior that we call the code of conduct. And we also go over the general rules and regulations of the facility. Once these evaluations are completed and the codes of conduct are signed, this package is transferred over to the social services department, where the client is assigned to a case manager. The case manager acts as the central point of contact for the duration of their stay. The case manager's job is really to provide the client with much needed interpersonal support, as well as to act as the connection to specialized services available at the facility and outside the facility. One of the first referrals that any of our clients will receive is a connection to the Larchmont's vocational team, who, along with the case manager and occupational therapist on site, will help to put together something called the service plan for the client. This will serve as a roadmap that clearly outlines the expectations for both the client and the staff members who are connected to their case. For some clients with limited employment history, this might mean weekly meetings with occupational therapists and ongoing soft skills training around resume building and interview prep with the vocational team. For other clients that may already be employed, it might mean bi-weekly employment retention meetings and referrals for educational resources to continue successfully down their career path. Each client's service plan is really an individually crafted and regularly updated document that reflects any shifting needs and will help guide them to independent living. While all of this is going on, the clients are also connected to a shelter housing team, and they will help to begin to identify the most appropriate path to securing housing. Much like the employment process, the housing opportunities will be largely individualized. The housing team will connect some clients to supportive housing options through HRA and the 2010E application. Other clients will be connected to apartments through subsidies or vouchers specific to employed clients. And there will be a handful of clients who will be will have independent housing opportunities available to them. The entire social services team comes together every 2 weeks to review the progress of each of the women that live in the facility and to coordinate services to ensure that all the needs are being met and that no gaps in service exist. We also understand that a major role for our program is to be a good neighbor to the surrounding community. So as Jody mentioned previously, one of the things that we see as an essential role of program leadership and something that we take very seriously is a participation in the community advisory board. Quarterly meetings are something that we are familiar with our other locations, something that we attend regularly. And those meetings really serve as an opportunity for the community to come together and talk about their experience with the facility, both positive and areas of concern. In addition to that, we believe it's important that community members are able to communicate with shelter leadership in real time, so that if there is an issue that can be addressed immediately, we don't have to wait for these quarterly advisory board meetings to engage. So contact information for the program leadership, as well as for myself and Shannon Potts, who is the director of programs linked to this project, will be provided to the community as well, just to make sure that we are always available and accessible. It's a model that we've used at our other shelter locations, and it's proven to give us the ability to have very good relationships and to continue to build on those relationships. I'm going to stick around for the entirety of the call. I would love to hear any questions that you have that are program related, and I will do my best to address any concerns that you may have. I'm going to go ahead and pass this along to Charles Mulham, our Director of Security.
Thank you, Kadon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to tonight. Appreciate it. My name is Charles Mulham. I am the Director of Security with Project Renewal. Just a quick background on myself. I got started with Project Renewal in 2016. Prior to that, I was a federal agent with the United States Department of Justice, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and I was a federal agent in New York my entire career, and that career spanned a little over 27 years. Since my time of employment with Project Renewal, as Director of Security, my main responsibilities are that I'm liaison with the community, as Leilani had mentioned earlier, the community advisory board meetings, the CABs. I'm present usually at a majority of those meetings. I'm also a liaison with the NYPD. I work on a daily basis with their NCOs, their neighborhood coordination officers. They are truly the officers that have the pulse of the precinct that they work in, definitely in hand. I initiate and oversee a very competitive process of interviewing and ultimately selecting a security company that I choose, and then the company collectively chooses to be employed at the facility. I work with our facilities manager to ensure that the building has all of the characteristics that will facilitate a sound security coverage. I'll work with our IT department as well in ensuring that our CCTV coverage is adequate and is IP-based so that we have access to it from many platforms. I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions. Although this project is definitely its embryonic stages, I hope to answer anything that you would have questions or concerns about when it comes to security. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. This is a lot of information. I'm wondering if we still need to share the screen or if we should, yeah, okay, great. I'm gonna just start with some questions of my own. First of all, anyone who wrote us emails before this meeting, thank you very much for all of that. It's very helpful. I think one of the questions and concerns was the process that has gotten here. For some people, it's the first that they've heard of this. So can you just explain a little bit of the process?
Sure. So the Department of Homeless Services and in previous administrations, it wasn't a practice to notify on shelters where, you know, in the past, shelters would just open up in wee hours of the night without any formal notification given to anyone. And so as a best practice with this administration, they decided to change the way we are opening up shelters, and a part of that change was to create a notification process that went with that. And so that notification process would come directly from the Department of Homeless Services, where we would first notify all of the elected officials in that respective district, and as well as the community board. And then the second part that would be a breakout of small community stakeholder meetings. We would come before, like what we're doing now, we notify, and then we come before the community board, we present to the community board. And if it's at all necessary, we will also hold smaller stakeholder meetings. If the community requests, such meetings, we honor those and we do that as well. So that's the process. And the reason being, it isn't, I know that we oftentimes get asked questions about how come it's with ensuring that we're not violating clients' rights in terms of sharing addresses and locations. We have to do this notification in a streamlined way, right, due to social service laws. And so that's the notification process, and this discussion is a part of that notification process.
And can you tell us how this site specifically was selected?
And so we have an open RFP that's open all year round.
That's a request for proposal.
Sorry.
Don't know what that
Yeah, sorry, a request for proposal. And so those are constantly being submitted. DHS looks at those proposals, rate them, review them and rate them. We do an assessment. We speak with the provider, and if it's a good fit, then we move forward with the project.
So in other words, the city decides it wants a shelter, and it puts out a request for proposals to independent social service organizations who would like to be the operators of that shelter, and then you grant the contract to somebody. So Project Renewal, can you just explain how this site was selected? Maybe Jody, I don't know if that's, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the Department of Homeless Services had heard from us. I guess the landlord and the broker had done some outreach directly to DHS, and they came to us and said, are you interested? And then we went on a series of site visits and got to know the landlord a little bit and made a determination, again, largely based on the size of the program and the vision that it would be around workforce development and employment, that it would be a good fit for us organizationally and consistent with our mission. So we went ahead and submitted a proposal through the request for proposal process that Leilani just talked about.
So that the site was actually identified even before the contractor was brought on. I just asked because there have been other circumstances where the service provider is secured and they go out and find the site. But in this case, the site preceded the contract. And actually, you said you don't yet have a contract. We don't have to get granular on every single thing. One of the concerns that we've heard, a couple of things. One is the building zoned for this? What kind of building code questions are there? There's been some questions about concerns about ongoing construction and scaffolding on the site. I wonder if you can talk just a little bit about the sort of physical space.
I'll start that, and then Jody can fill in if I leave out anything. So the building, there's been pretty extensive analysis of the zoning for the building, and it is an as-of-right use for a shelter. So there's no zoning variance that is required. There's no appearance or a process for that. The building is landmarked, which means that we're not going to be doing any work at all on the exterior. All of the construction will be interior renovations. And there have been a lot of consultations between the architect, the Department of Buildings, and the fire department to make sure that the physical configuration and layout fully conforms with fire department regulations and DOB building code. So before any plans get submitted to DOB for approval, all of those consultations have been happening.
Okay.
There's no point in going forward if the building isn't zoned for it, and
right.
if we can't do it in conformance.
And what about the selection of a contractor? Has that already been determined? I guess that there is construction going on the site or not? I'm not quite clear about that.
We're not doing anything on the site because we don't have site control. So I can't speak to what is happening on the site. And we have engaged an architect, but not a contractor.
That's very helpful.
And when we say we, I just want to be clear, the landlord has engaged an architect and the landlord will engage a contractor, and Project Renewal's official relationship with this program will begin once we have a contract with the city, a lease with the landlord, and we begin operating our program.
Right.
I believe the landlord is and has been separate and apart from this project, doing some basic due diligence on his building with respect to compliance with various local laws. But he's been clear with us that he's not going to start renovations until we have a lease with him and we have a contract with the city. So this is very much going to be sort of an iterative and stepwise process. And we are, I would guess, and again, I've been wrong before, I'll hedge a little bit and give a range. We are at least 6 to 12 months, probably 12 plus months away from real renovation beginning on this building to make it kind of ready and compliant for a shelter use.
That's really helpful. It's also really helpful to understand the details of this process, you know, in terms of construction and everything. And another question I had is the question about that people have had is the question about 90 beds. How was that determined? How is that evaluated in terms of added density to the street? Is that something that is still up for, you know, to be determined? Can you just shed some light on that? Because I think there are some concerns about a building just completely filling up with what feels like a lot of people, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
So the number of people that can live in a shelter is actually a very, very highly regulated process. It's actually, the rules are called Callahan rules, and you can kind of look them up. But they determine everything from how much space a person has to have, the distance in all directions from one person to another, how much locker and personal belonging space a person can have. And so the number 90 is really the maximum number that meets all of the regulations inside that particular building envelope. Because as Jody said, given how hard it is to find shelter, it's very difficult, you know, to afford to do a shelter and then not maximize what the legal and regulatory occupancy would be.
So from a financial perspective, it is helpful for you to be able to have maximum occupancy. And what about, will these women have children? Will they have visitors? We just to get a sense of what daily life in that building will be like. So
probably Kadon should answer most of this, but I will say that the women may have children, but they won't have children with them. There won't be any children in this shelter. And visitors aren't allowed inside the building either, but I'll let Kadon say a little bit more about that.
Oh, no, you pretty much covered it. It's a single adult shelter. There are patient privacy issues, so no one who is not technically assigned to that shelter or providing some service in that building will be allowed to come in and out of the building. So it will only be the 90 women who are assigned to that location.
So if the women want to visit with a friend or girlfriend, a mother, an aunt, a cousin, a boyfriend, they cannot do that at the building.
That cannot happen at the site, correct.
Okay. I would like to open it up to questions from our committee. And I'm going to ask Adam to run this. I see Keen's hand. Keen, can you unmute yourself? Can the people in our committee maybe unmute yourselves, and then Adam can call on you guys. Keen, you need to unmute yourself, I think. There you go.
I did. So I should go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds wonderful. I'm so glad you're doing it. Thank you so much for coming. And it also sounds very expensive. And I worry so much about the city not having any money at all for anything that's good. And this is something that's good. And what what do you see in terms of city budget? Is there a problem there? That's the question.
So the city operates under really a consent decree that goes back 30 years that says that there is a right embedded in the New York State Constitution for anyone who is homeless to have shelter immediately, meaning literally that night. So while the city's budget has certainly been challenged by the needs of sheltering an increasing number of homeless people, there really isn't a lot of wiggle room for the city about providing shelter, because it has an obligation that it actually doesn't have for many other social services that people need. So there have been times in years past where budgets have been cut. I mean, usually the budget cuts are around social services when they happen. But the basic requirement to provide shelter is kind of unassailable.
So you're not worried about the city financial situation?
I think everyone's worried about the city's situation.
The contract that the city has with you, you do not expect to be slashed in any way because of the current budget crisis. I mean, there obviously would be a concern from all of us, including the people who live in the shelter, if your budget is slashed.
Well, the other factor is that because the city has this obligation to provide shelter, when it has to secure shelter at the last minute, it's often using extremely expensive space. So it's actually more cost effective to have the shelter capacity that the city needs on a negotiated basis that's predictable and manageable, rather than always scrambling to find shelter at the last minute and not be able to provide the services or provide a physical environment that actually helps the people who are homeless.
And have you been given a budget? I think you said that you don't have a budget yet, so that's still to be worked out, right?
It's in negotiation.
We submitted one as part of our proposal, and it's become a back and forth conversation that will happen over time.
Okay, great. Anybody else on our committee?
I see Wayne.
Hi, it's Wayne Quadler. Thank you guys for doing this. This is a really great project. I'm really glad to to hear about it. A couple questions. Is a lease arrangement with the landlord normal in these sort of circumstances, or is it more normal for like Project Renewal to outright own the building? And how long would your lease be with the landlord in this case?
So shelters exist in all sorts of ownership arrangements. I think most shelter in the city is actually leased from private landlords. Some is with some shelter, and some that we operate are with city-owned buildings. So the city has over the years converted many buildings to shelter from whatever purpose they had previously. And there is shelter that is also owned by the nonprofit. We actually have all three types. Leases leases can be any length, but the human services contract is a maximum of 9 years, except in an unusual circumstance. So typically, the shelter lease term is mirrors the lease of the human services contract, so that they, end at the same time. But since shelter almost never gets terminated, the leases usually roll on. They get renewed.
And what's the configuration for each woman? Does each person get their own apartment, or is it communal living?
It is, each person does not get their own room. So there are shared rooms. Because the rooms in the building are not huge, it's not going to be big dormitories at all. There is a dining room in the basement, so meals are communal on the ground floor. There are a couple or a few bathrooms on each floor, so their bathrooms are shared as well.
Also, can you talk a little bit about the employment program or the training for the women, and what's is sort of involved in that? And do you have employers set up already, relationships with employers, or is this something you recruit as you go on?
So yeah, we have existing relationships through our Next Step program who have been working with populations similar to the population we'll be working with at the Larchmont. We also plan to reach out to the community, to the surrounding community, to find employment opportunities that would be closer to home as well. So we have some experience kind of outreaching employers. We have an existing vocational team embedded at one of our other facilities, and we'll be looking to that arrangement for some best practices as well. But we're actually in a great position in that we have an entire kind of vocational focus to our organizational philosophy to begin with. And this shelter will give us an opportunity to explore, further explore like the best way to marry those two focuses.
Thanks, Wayne. That's a great question.
Sure.
Who else?
I see Betty, who's on the community board.
Hi, thanks. I'm just wondering who are the politicians that are supporting this shelter? Is Assemblymember Glick or Senator Hoylman or Margaret Chin or have any of them provided sort of political backing to this as of yet?
We a part of the notification process, notified all the elected officials. I believe maybe some of their staffers may be a part of the call tonight, but we haven't received any objections. But I do know that they're in support of the community board as well position on the project. But we haven't, to answer your question, received any flags or objections. We had conversations with each of their offices and provided the same level of information that we're providing the board tonight. They had a lot of questions that we were able to answer, but no major flags from any of the offices. But I do know that they're definitely in support of the position of the community board on this project.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. Anyone else in our committee? Okay, let's open it up to.
Sorry, I have another question, Susanna. I'm sorry.
Wayne.
Does Project Renewal or the Department of Homeless Services have other units in CB2? Is this the first one, or?
Yeah, so once upon a time, there was a women's shelter in your community district. It was a mental health site located on Lafayette, and then that moved to Brooklyn. So at this moment in time, Community Board 2 doesn't have any DHS shelters. There aren't any shelters operated by with DHS, and so this would be the first.
Okay, and Susanna, I don't know, you might know the answer to this question. The proposed building on West 14th Street, is that a DHS program?
My understanding is that it is. Leilani, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We don't know when that's coming on board. That's going to be run by CUCS, and it's a
safe haven. That's correct. That hasn't opened just yet.
There are a lot of problems with the buildings and stuff, but the service provider has been contracted.
Correct.
A lot of
correct.
Problems.
Correct, but that's separate from shelter. This is a shelter that we're notifying on today. That particular site that we're talking about is going to be operated by CUCS, and that's like a safe haven drop-in center model, which is a separate model for our street homeless population.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that's not live just yet. We're fingers crossed hoping to get something open soon.
Okay. Just as a follow-up, Wayne, the shelter that was on Lafayette Street was very well run. He was very supportive of it, and it was there for quite some time and really worked very well with the community.
And was that a Project Renewal project?
No.
It's a different operator.
CUCS.
Oh, that was CUCS. Okay, who's going to be running the Safe Haven?
And if we could be cordial to our colleagues in the business, I need to say that you could not do better than CUCS. Perhaps with Project Renewal tied for first, but they're a great provider.
Excellent provider.
Well, we're very lucky and very happy to hear that. If there are no more questions from the community.
I see Valerie on community board has a question.
Valerie.
Hey, it's Valerie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
sorry,
Loud
there's
and clear.
a helicopter. I'm going to be really quick. What do you anticipate as the number one or number two reason why a woman would seek out your services? Are you anticipating it being domestic violence, poverty intervention, etc.? If you could speak to that.
There's
So-
several drivers. I'll let was someone from Project Renewal want to answer?
Sure. I think I think the main driver for a woman being assigned to our shelter will be the need for employment. I think DHS does a really good job at the assessment phase in determining what the prevailing barrier to housing is, and whether that be, you know, substance abuse issues, mental health issues, and connecting clients to the appropriate supportive services. And, you know, this is really going to be a shelter that's specifically for people who are, for women whose prevailing barrier is financial. They're not able to afford to live independently without some level of support, and or they aren't able to obtain employment without, you know, employment services. So that's the population we're anticipating working with.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to add that it's possible that some of our clients or many of our clients will have domestic violence in their history. There is a separate and active domestic violence shelter system operated by the Human Resources Administration, the city's HRA agency. And more often than not, individuals in active DV situations who really feel like they need the discretion that system affords will choose that doorway instead of the broader Department of Homeless Services system.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So I think we'll open it up to the public, and I think what we're going to do, what we really would like to do this in 3 tiers. We first really need to hear from neighbors, people who live on the block or within, you know, a couple of blocks. So those are the first people we'd like to hear from. And then we'll ask for people from Community District 2, and then we can open it up to the broader public. But we really, as a community board, we really need that input to start local and move out. So let's, and I think that's why there've been the hands have been lowered so that we can do this filtering. I hear someone say something. What?
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say let's lower the hands, and folks who are neighbors can raise their hands again. So I see Michael Namer is the first hand to be re-raised as a neighbor. So Michael, you've got 2 minutes.
Okay, good. Michael, you're on.
Michael, you'll have to unmute yourself, and then you can speak.
Got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for being here.
I live next door to the Larchmont, and we've worked very, very well with them for many years. They fit very well on their block and did a lot of things that they started to work on their facade, and they spent a lot of money doing that. That being said, we are now looking at something that is very grandiose situation that all of us have to see now as a community, as a block. We have to live together and make sure that both sides are okay with the situation, not just one. That being said, there's a bunch of things that I wanted to ask about. For example, you have a backyard where you're going to be smoking cigarettes. We have a building that's usually not a smoking area. Obviously, that can come over and start going into our apartments, which I've seen before in other buildings, that people just ignore the idea that they don't have to, they have to allow them to do a lot of work to stop any smoke and that sort of thing to come into our property. Number two is that we're all concerned about how we're going to interact with a community of people that have been there for a very long time versus a community that is transient in a sense. I have read that sometimes in another community board area, which I think was on 45th Street, they had a very bad situation where somebody got killed in your building. And we want to know a little bit about that as well, because it was told to us that everything is safe, and safety is the one big elephant in the room. We need to make sure that we're going to be safe, that they're going to be safe, and we work together. We're going to bring up a lot of issues that may change our
Thank you,
lives
Michael.
as well.
You're at time.
Okay.
Michael, thank you for your question. Can you guys address this question of safety and smoking?
I'll start. So, first of all, on the smoking, some people who live in shelter, like other people, smoke. The building itself is non-smoking, so people have to exit the building in order to smoke. In most shelter environments, there's a desire that people do not go out into the street and congregate right on the street in front of the building. So the only other option is to have an enclosed area where smoking is allowed. The building does have a curfew, so there's a time limit at night for that. But yes, that backyard will be an area where people will be allowed to smoke. With the incident that you referred to on East 45th Street, this was a shelter client who was elderly and sick. EMS was called because she was actually dying. EMS put her on a gurney, and they transported her in the elevator, and the elevator broke down while she was in it. And for 45 minutes, the elevator didn't move, and she was pronounced dead inside the elevator. That is a city-owned building. City-owned buildings have a terrible time finding capital to keep the buildings up, which is one of the reasons why the city doesn't like to open new shelters in city-owned buildings. It's very, very difficult to finance the renovations. So it was a terribly unfortunate incident, but it was not a murder. It was not a violent situation at all. It was a medical issue.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Ken A., you are next up. I'll allow you to talk. You can go ahead and
Hello, can you hear me?
speak.
Yes,
Loud and
I
clear.
just want to speak in support of the shelter. I think it's a great thing. There is no shelters in the district, which I find kind of odd. But before I moved, I was pretty close to the 45th Street shelter, and I never felt like it was unsafe. To be honest, I never even knew it was there until I looked it up just now. And so I would never say that having a shelter in the neighborhood is a burdensome to the people in the neighborhood from my own personal experience. So I think this is a great idea, and thank you for doing this.
Ken, can you tell us where you live? I know you don't have to give us the address, but just more or less.
Okay, I used to live on 45th Street in Manhattan, but now I live in downtown Brooklyn.
Okay, thank you. We would love ideally to start out with people who live in the immediate neighborhood for public comment. Next.
Looks like Richard Schoninger.
Richard, you want to
Richard, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Yes. Hi. Two quick questions. For a lay person, excuse me, I live on 31 West 11th, right next door, the same building as Michael Namer. Two questions. One is, for us lay people, can you distinguish just the day-to-day differences between what's planned on 14th Street, just west of 6th Avenue, and the Larchmont? Two, when the Larchmont Hotel was operating privately, what was the capacity relative to the 90 beds that are scheduled now or proposed now? And then three, given the lease that you would expect to sign, and that you're saying it's a women's shelter, can that use be changed over the 10-year period or 9-year period? Thank you.
Thank you for those are good questions.
Thank you. Leilani, I think you need to speak to 14th Street because we're not as familiar with the project. Is it a safe haven?
It is. So the project coming to 14th Street is not the same type of project of what the project that we're talking about tonight. That project is catered towards a street homeless population. It's not the same as shelter, essentially, because there's just different requirements, and it's a lower threshold and lower barriers for our street homeless population. For example, I don't want to spend too much time talking about that particular project, but that project is a safe haven model that'll be operated by CUCS. And the difference simply is that of the population. So the population that we'll be servicing on 11th Street will be for single adult women. The project on 14th Street caters more towards our street homeless population. And there are just some, what's a little bit different about safe havens from standard shelter is the process in terms of placements, and also the fact that there aren't, curfew looks different. Folks can come as they are in a safe haven type of setting, and meaning, again, I don't want to take up too much time, but folks can come in as they are off the street and into that particular location. This is a different process for this project. This project, clients will be coming through intake assessment. They'll be assessed, and then a placement will be made. If they're employed or employable, and if they have ties to Manhattan, the borough, or in particular this community, then they'll be assigned to this particular site. So the way placements will be operating for this site is very different from the 14th Street process. If that makes sense. I'm sorry if I didn't answer that question clearly.
It's a complicated question to answer, but I think you hit on the primary points, and I think if Richard would like to know more about that, we can talk about that at another opportunity, or you can look up CUCS's website or look up the word safe haven, and we can see more about that. But the point about
yeah. Susanna, do you want me to answer? I know there was at least one other question in there that Richard had.
Yes, what was the capacity of the Larchmont when it was a hotel?
Yeah, so I'll acknowledge having anticipated this question, and so I'm reading off of an email from Shep Morgan, the landlord. Historically, there were 28 SRO single rooms and 42 SRO double occupancy rooms. So the total was generally 112 people in the building when it was at full capacity.
Okay, thank you. And the other question that he had was the lease. Can the use be changed over the 10-year period?
So there's actually, I think there's two parts actually to the answer. One is, can the use of the building be changed? And I can't speak to that. I suppose anything within the zoning, our building code could be allowed. But as it relates to us, our contract with the city is to run this particular shelter for women. The city, I suppose, could come to us and ask us if we were willing to do something different there. But our intention is to run this shelter exactly as we've described it. And I don't think we would be, we would not be thrilled at the idea of having to change the use from what this is.
Okay, that's great. let's move on. There was a suggestion that instead of asking you guys to address the questions one by one, that we try to lump them together. Let's see what the next comment is. Nathaniel Weiss, Adam.
Nathaniel, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
It's just a quick statement of support. We've lived on the block for 12 years. We're a couple doors down to the east. And we raised kids who had great experiences at PS 41. We lived downtown since the 1980s. And we wanted to make a particular point that so much of the cultural capital and sense of community of the West Village is its great progressive history. And just two examples come to mind I want to invoke for this project and why we should do it. With Emma Lazarus, who lived one block over at 18 West 10th, it has the words on the Statue of Liberty, "Give me your tired, your poor." That the same poem goes on to say, "Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me." And when people visit the neighborhood, I like to show them that. And I'd also like to be able to show them what we're doing about homelessness now. The second example is the beautiful Church of Ascension right on the corner at 5th Avenue and 11th Street, is famous in part for having opened its doors after the stock market crash in 1929 so that homeless men could sleep in the pews. And that happened throughout the Great Depression. And so I see this as a great way to honor the history and welcome this partnership as a chance to do something that we can be proud of to help these women get back on their feet. Thank you.
For your comments. Next.
Thank you. Susan Friedland, you're allowed to talk.
I also live on 11th Street between 5th and 6th. I do have a comment and a question. The comment is the landlord was in non-compliance with landmark regulations. I'm not sure what he did, but the reason I think that there's still scaffolding up is that he is, I guess, obliged to fix whatever it is he did that they don't like. The second thing is I'd like to know a little bit about the economics of this. Who pays project renewal?
The
Hi,
city will
Susan.
pass. Go ahead, Jody.
Oh, yeah. I unfortunately, we really can't speak to sort of the current status of the landlord's building. I can represent that he has told me that he works actively towards compliance with various local laws, but it would be, I just don't have enough insight to say more on that. In terms of the financing, we enter into a contract with the Department of Homeless Services, and they pay us to operate the building from an operational standpoint and a social services standpoint. And the funding that they give us in our line item budget includes a rent line. So we also have the relationship with the landlord, and we pay rent on a monthly basis.
Thank you, Susan. That was a good question. Next, Lori.
Thank
Skornick.
you. Lori, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Harmon Skornick, Lori's husband, and we live in 31 West 11th as well, right next door to the Larchmont. First thing I'd just like to address is the discussion about the scaffolding and the intentions of the current landlord. There's been scaffolding up there for 5 years with no perceivable work having been done. So his intention of maintaining the land, the code for what's it called? Is questionable. Anyway, two questions for you. One is there are current residents that live in that building. I think there are maybe 5 or 6 current residents. What will happen to them? Some of them are men, in fact. Are they going to be evicted? And the second question is, you had said earlier that visitors are not allowed inside the building for the clients. Does that mean that when visitors do want to visit them, which I'm sure they will, that they'll have to loiter out in front of the building to see them?
Thank you.
Hi there, Carmen and Lori. I remember having met you at a previous meeting, so it's nice to be in touch again. I'll say a few things. First, there are 6 existing all-male tenants in the building. 5 of the 6 stay there regularly, one of whom has another residence and maintains an address there, but is not regularly there for practical purposes. The landlord is considering this group fully in all of the changes. He has a certificate of non-harassment from the city's Housing Preservation Department, HPD, which essentially means that they've signed off that he's doing all of the right things with respect to their interests. They will maintain their tenancy there following the renovations. They will be offered the opportunity to stay there and be accommodated within the building during the renovations. And they will each be offered the opportunity to either stay in their existing units or move to larger units at the end state of the renovations. And I think you had another question. I'm sorry.
The question was, if the visitors cannot enter the facility, does that mean that there's going to be people loitering outside?
Yeah, I want to turn this one over to Kate on. I think as a practical matter, we don't see a lot of visitors to the single adults we should house in shelter, and that this has never been an issue historically, but I'd want Kate on, who has more expertise than I, to speak to this.
Yeah, I think Jody touches on the point. We don't see a lot of visitors in the single adult shelter system, especially with our employed clients. Our employed clients tend to be on the go, coming and going from work, and really our supportive services are geared towards kind of keeping them engaged and moving them into independent living situations as quickly as possible. There really isn't just a ton of congregating in front of our shelters with family members and visitors. We don't see a lot of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is John Rudolph. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Rudolph. I grew up on 11th Street. I currently do not live on the block, but I still own 35 West 11th Street. And I want to, first of all, express my support for the project. I think it's a great idea. I have a question about the process, which I'd like to get an answer to when I finish my statement. What is the community board's role in this? Do you have an actual legal authority to approve or disapprove this project, or is it merely advisory? And when will the board, the CB2, actually make its position known? I want to go back to the meeting that we had last week, which was a community meeting with Project Renewal, and some of the objections that were raised to the project at that time, some questions that were asked. And I think there are some legitimate questions to be asked about the project. I share the concern about people congregating outside, even though I am very much in support of this project. And I would hope that this community advisory board panel would be able to work out some kind of an accommodation. But I want to just provide a little bit of historical context for what's going on. A number of people last week indicated that 11th Street is a quiet residential street, and this is not an appropriate use. Well, first of all, from a zoning perspective, it is permitted.
10 seconds.
And let's just say this quiet residential street, let's look at some of the activities there. There is a university. There are 3 restaurants, 2 churches, and a Verizon store, and countless home businesses. So it's a pretty active street. And
Please
up until
conclude.
recently, we had the Larchmont Hotel, which was a place for tourists to come. So I think that within the context of the block, it makes perfect sense. And I also believe that we as a community owe it to ourselves and the city to be part of the solution to the homeless problem that New York faces and that our very neighborhood faces.
Thank you, John. Your time is up. I'm just going to address one question, which is the role of the community board, and Carter is here and can shed more light on it. The community board is always only an advisory body. In some cases where there is a land use review process, if the building is not as of right, the community board is a mandated part of the process. In this case, it is not. But we think that our local electeds like to hear from us. And so that's why we've been asked to have this meeting, but also, and anyway, that we're advisory. Did I fumble that one enough?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Susanna was saying, we're advisory in our positions in this particular case. This is important for us to weigh in on because Community Board 2 doesn't provide enough social services to the city as a whole as far as the services that are available. So I think that we're always looking for more opportunities to have facilities like this so that we can do that. As far as, I'm not sure what the exact zoning is on this particular street. I haven't looked, but I do know that based on the certificate of occupancy, it looks like it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, even if it was not allowed. It is an SRO. Those are typically the types of facilities that are used for this, for short-term stays. I mean, that allows, the same traditional SROs that you see on the Bowery, up to, boutique hotels. These are all pretty consistent with the types of buildings that allow these types of uses. But we are advisory, and we're the first step. And generally, going back to Betty's original question, the elected officials like the process to go through. Generally, the community board is the first stop. We did have a brief meeting sort of outlining what the details were on this quite some time ago when we could actually meet in person. And now as the projects move forward, we welcome everybody to come and speak with us and figure out what the small details are to have the best fit. And I think that that's one of the reasons that having meetings like this is important. And as we heard, this is in motion, and we want to have this work in the best possible way as it can for the local residents and for the community and for the operators, and also for those that are utilizing the services.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Thank you.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear.
Good. Hi, Elizabeth Gilmore, former CB2 board member and current public member of the Parks Committee. I've lived on the block since 1975. And I would like to register my support and also to thank and applaud a letter from my neighbor, Esther Allen, that was sent to you. I think she covered some points that I might have, but I just wanted to say briefly that particularly at this point in time, I hope we can all find it in our hearts to welcome the women who have not enjoyed all the privileges and benefits we have, and strike a blow for diversity and anti-racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Alan Belzer? Alan, you should unmute yourself. Alan, can you unmute yourself? There you go. No, you're muted. Alan?
Let's continue with Samir.
Yeah, okay. Alan Belzer.
Oh, no, sorry, never mind. Alan figured it out. Go ahead, Alan.
Good, I'm glad to see that. I'm here because I've been involved with Project Renewal as a board member for 20 years. Before that, 10 years, I worked with them on building buildings, getting the money to raise from building buildings. And I walked away for almost 50 years.
I'm sorry, what did you say about almost 50 years?
I lived in the neighborhood. I live 3.5 blocks away. I live on 8th Street. I live on 5th Avenue and 8th Street.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I've been here for almost 50 years. And I mean, I used to live on 10th Street, which is
Your input.
during the time I've been with Project Renewal, they have gone from $2 million a year in budget to almost $100 million a year. Project Renewal has done that by doing a fabulous job with its clients in getting the clients' health, homes, and jobs, and in doing a job with the communities. The communities we are in sometimes, probably more than sometimes at the beginning, are not so happy about us. By the time we get through and build our places and have our homeless people, almost all of whom are tougher than the people we're going to have in this place, the communities love us.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for vouching for the operator, because the operator is everything.
It sure is.
Samir?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm a West Village resident. I live down the street. So I just want to say thank you for giving me a chance to speak about the shelter that's being proposed. Recently, the community board signed a letter that said the community board is committing to efforts to foster diverse and inclusive neighborhoods and enact anti-racist policies. I believe that we're a neighborhood that can be more diverse, equitable, and home to all kinds of people. These shelters are made to serve people already in the community, as I mentioned earlier, and that's why we need one in every neighborhood. And I think it's important in terms of diversity that we don't just add new residents who are diverse, but it's very important that we keep the ones we have, even if they're just simply down in their luck, they lost their job, they have a healthcare issue, whatever. This project, so in New York City, I don't think they talked about this, but Black and Hispanic and Latinx New Yorkers are disproportionately affected by homelessness. So by supporting this shelter, you're actually implicitly supporting our Black and brown siblings who are more down in their luck. In the letter, it also said that we should empower under-resourced community members. And talk about under-resourced, the people using these shelters can't even afford a roof over their heads. The least we can do is help them get back on their feet after being on the street for so long. The shelter is going to provide much needed support such as case management, workforce development, and help with more permanent housing placement, all of which will help our under-resourced community members. I strongly encourage the community board to support this project. Even though I know it's just an advisory role, I think it's important to really make a commitment to the least privileged of our community. I truly hope that that letter is something that you all will stick to today. I know that this will be, I actually still have 15 seconds, I've been timing it. I know that this will be hard for both newcomers and existing residents, but it's definitely worth doing. We really have a chance to help these people and we should. Thank you for giving me my full time. Thank you.
Thank you, and I would love if you would submit that. It sounds like you have it in writing. If you would send that to me in writing, that would be great. Our board chair Carter is suggesting that since we have 10 people, let's see if everyone can produce their comments to maybe just 1 minute, and then we maybe get able to get through almost everybody. Let's go to Arthur Levin.
Hi, I will try to speak quickly. I live at 20 West 11th Street as one of 2 co-operator occupants. I've lived on the block for over 5 decades. I wish to speak in support of this project. My now deceased life partner, Bill Cox, worked as a counselor at Project Renewal on East 3rd for a number of years, and I had the opportunity to meet staff, some residents, during that time he worked there, and I based my support not only on the need, but on my positive experiences with the agency, its staff, and residents. I know there's a difference among my neighbors about whether to welcome or oppose this project. I urge my neighbors to keep an open mind and to engage in constructive and ongoing dialogue supported by the facts rather than by opinion. I would hope that those here tonight respect our community's long historic commitment to social justice and equality for those who our society often treats as less than, as well as our robust history of support for equal justice. In light of our history, I believe our community should welcome Project Renewal and pledge to work together in common purpose to further its mission, which if successful, can improve all of our lives.
Arthur, thank you so much for that. And for
Thank
that
you very much.
Can I ask you to submit that as an email? And let me ask also a favor of everyone here. We've heard a lot of voices of support, and that's really helpful. And if you would like to provide us with more eloquent words than I will come up with, I would love to hear your emails. It is important, though, that we hear some concerns so that we can get some questions answered. So I would ask, if you support this, just say support or support enthusiastically, and so we can move on and see if maybe there are people who have answers that they need answered, questions that they need answered. So I won't lower all hands and ask everyone to raise them again, but just say support or else ask your question. Next one, Spencer Heckwolf.
Spencer.
Hi, yeah, I support this project, and I also want to say that some people had questions about the zoning. The zoning does conform, but that sort of should be beside the point. Zoning isn't written on stone tablets, it can be changed, and there'll be other shelters, possibly in CB2, that don't conform to the zoning and that need a rezoning, and those should be supported as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your brevity. Sally Ross.
Sally, you'll just have to unmute yourself.
Sally, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Loud and clear.
Good evening. Thank you for hosting this. I actually have, I live at 15 West 11th, so just a few doors away from the Larchmont. And I actually have a very sort of specific kind of practical question. And it relates to the outdoor space. My understanding, or at least experience having lived in this building for 20 years, is that there isn't currently an outdoor space at the Larchmont. I face the back of the buildings, and there's sort of an echo chamber, and you hear every pin drop and every noise in the background. So my question is actually very specific and practical. There isn't currently an outdoor space at the Larchmont. How big will this space be? Will it be enclosed? And how many people, what is the capacity? And because my real concern is just the noise volume because of the echo chamber in the back. And, you know, I smoked for 30 years of my life, and when I wanted to smoke a cigarette, I would just go for a walk around the corner. Is that a possibility? Is there any way to sort of revisit this outdoor space because of the concern of the noise? Because if there's 90 people living in the building, at any given time, there could be 20, 30 people outside, and it'll be loud and smoky.
Thank you for
Thanks,
that.
Sally.
Can you tell us a little bit about the outdoor space?
Sally, hi, it's Jody Rudin. As you were speaking, I was moving through my emails, trying to find out the specifics of whether it's on the east or west side, and I don't want to misspeak and be wrong. I can commit to getting back to you. I think the broader point here, though, is that we're coming to all of you with a program relatively unformed. So if we see the rear yard as an opportunity to prevent loitering in the front, if there needs to be a balance between how we use the rear yard and the front, we're open to it. If there needs to be restrictions on hours, if there needs to be some buffer erected, we come to this with complete openness. So I can get back to you on this. We can get back to you on the specifics of your question. But we don't want to inconvenience anyone. And if there's a way to navigate this to create some win-wins and to mitigate concerns, we're interested in doing that.
Thank you. Very helpful. G. Capel. Can you unmute yourself?
I'm unmuted. I also live at 15 West 11th. Quick question. Shep Morgan, is he a new owner?
Two questions.
It's my understanding that this property has been in his family for some time. I can't say more than that.
So it's the same family that lives on 8th Street and they've owned it. They gave it the name Larchmont. Do you know that? Do you know if it's the same family? The name seems unfamiliar to me.
Yeah, I don't want to speak and be wrong. I get the sense that the property's been in his family for a long time. He doesn't do shelters as as a
Right.
thing. This is his first interaction with the Department of Homeless Services.
Got it.
Yeah.
He has a number, there are dozens of outstanding violations on the building now, which doesn't seem to me the sort of thing that the owners I knew would allow to take place in their building. I mean, it looks as though, I'm on the DOB website. It looks as though he has a lot of work to do to bring this building up to DOB requirements. And I just, that obviously has to happen before you occupy the building. And I'm interested, and you said that he came to you, right?
The city, the Department of Homeless Services had identified this as a viable shelter. And I think had some conversations with some providers and has been assessing it for some number of years. And they came to us in the last 2 years. Yes, the city.
Because I remember at the last meeting, there was talk about that woman who had a problem, who got stuck in the elevator and died. And your head said, basically, you know, it was the people who run the building's responsibility. If we have a shelter here where the owner is somebody who has dozens of outstanding violations, it seems to me not a good entry into the situation.
Well, I think one difference, if I can speak out of turn, is that in that case, the owner of the property was the city. In this case, you guys are going to be tenants of a private property owner, which presumably gives you a lot more leeway. And I can only imagine that you can't open a shelter if there's violations on the building.
Right, I'm just saying, it seems to be an extraordinary number of violations. And I welcome anybody listening just to go to the DOB website and pull the building up and have a look. Anyway, this is my wife.
This is Diane Coppell. I'm a longtime board member of Greenwich House, and am very supportive of projects that can help our city and our citizens. I would like to know if you have plans drawn and if they're available for review, and have they been submitted to the DOB?
There are plans that have been drawn up. Those plans go back and forth for review with DOB and with the fire department. But there are some ongoing conversations still happening, I believe, so the plans aren't final.
When will they, and when can we review them?
You want to say something, Susanna?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that it's fair that we will ask you to come back when you have plans, just share them with us. It's an absolutely fair request.
The backyard is super quiet, and Sally Ross's comment is a very, very valid one. I live on the second floor, and I have front and back, and whether it's the back or the front, smelling smoke, party sounds. So if that is something, while you're designing this, that should really be addressed for the back, and how that is worked out. Because one thing is, I don't like us and them, and the idea that there's security that doesn't allow a client of, a woman to feel respected in the community if they're not allowed to walk on the street at certain times of the day. That would be another issue that I would want to address. It should be inclusive.
Thank you. I'm going to move on because you guys have had some time. Let's go on to Megan. Hi.
I think Lisa, sorry.
I'm sorry, Lisa Rapkin. And Capels, thank you very much for that input. It's all coming in.
Hi, and thank you. It's Lisa and Corey Rapkin, and we live on the street at 15 West. And first, thank you for the presentation and the opportunity for us to have some valuable information, which is, I think, the most important thing for us to better understand the scope of the project. Clearly, as people have been in the city for a long time, we're very happy to have the opportunity to be part of things that are supportive and transformative to our communities, but we need sufficient information in order to understand the approach and the viability of it. When you talked about the Largemont, what I'd be interested in understanding is how's that capacity been over the last few years or 5 years, not what its ultimate capacity could have been over the life of its pendency. And then when I think about the utilization and the densification that you're talking about with 90 people, could you talk to us about the staffing as well? The staffing, things that they'll need in order for them to come back and forth from their employment. The security would be very important to us because that can, influence how people feel about the face that it has to the community or the face that it has to the street. So maybe you guys can talk to us about all of the people in the building at its peak and how the Largemont has been operating over the last few years, so we can get a sense of what the difference might feel like.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So I can speak a little bit about the staffing. We're still, in negotiations with DHS regarding the overall budget, but we do have a fairly clear vision of what our staffing will look like. As I mentioned previously, there will be operations staff who are really charged with managing the day-to-day movement within the facility, whether that be providing clients with necessary toiletries, making sure that the flow of traffic is moving in the right way, alerting clients when meals are being served, helping clients with backups, accessing laundry services, accessing their medication, whatever their day-to-day needs are. In addition, there will be an entire social services department equipped with case managers who will be the main point of contact for clients, as well as housing specialists who will work with clients to connect them to supportive housing or apartments with subsidies attached to them, as well as occupational therapists who will help clients to develop some of the skills they may need for daily living. And then most importantly, or last but not least, our vocational team who will help clients connect to employment opportunities or help them to take their current employment and continue to grow in that particular field. So there is kind of a clear vision for what we'd like to do with the program, and we're really looking forward to implementing it here at this location.
I think the question is just one of how many people. So I realize you don't have a budget yet and you haven't staffed.
Right. So it's tough to answer that without a finalized budget.
I mean, 5 people, 10 people, 50 people, ballpark, handful. All right, we don't know.
I think we're reluctant to be held to something till we have a budget, but I think, 5 or 10 at any given shift, plus a security force, and then the actual overarching full-time employee count would be a multiplier of that.
Okay, fair enough. Does any one of you have familiarity with what the density of that large one has been in the last few years? No.
I don't think we can speak to that in specific. I know it's been empty for some period of time. So for that period, it's just been the 5 existing residents. I believe the landlord has rented out to some sort of dance school on an interim basis, but I don't know the capacity.
Okay, it sounds like there are a lot of questions coming up tonight, but that are really for the landlord. Are we going to Megan, Adam?
Yes.
Hi.
Megan, go ahead.
Thank you. I work in the neighborhood. I don't live in the neighborhood because frankly, I can't afford to. But I'm here to speak in favor of the women's shelter. I believe we have a responsibility to our unhoused neighbors because I believe in human dignity. And fulfilling this responsibility means opening quality shelters across all 5 boroughs. And that's why I support the shelter today in one of our wealthiest and most privileged neighborhoods. And I hope that the community board will do all that they can do to expedite this process for project renewal.
Thank you, Megan. And by the way, working on Community Board 2 still makes you a member of the community. Danielle Epstein?
Hi, I live at 25 West 11th Street, which is the brownstone directly next door to the Larchmont. I can speak a little bit to the fact that the backyard garden is maybe 12 feet wide because it backs up to my garden. I do have some concerns about people being out there because it's fairly easy to climb over the fence. So that would be one thing. But although I'm not against in any way having a shelter there, I am concerned about the ways that the building is going to get constructed, given that I've lived there for probably 26 years now, and it's the last 5 to 6 years with the scaffolding and the lack of communication and my concerns about what might happen in terms of any kind of restoration and how they've gone about it has been terrible. Down to repointing the brick in the back garden and having like brick raining down on people's heads. So I have real concerns about Shep Morgan being in charge of that. And I'm sorry that I'm speaking to that and not to the project, because I think the project is really wonderful. But my concerns are about like the safety of my building and the safety of my family while that kind of thing is going on. And we do share a party wall, and my building is 1820s. So I just wanted to comment on that as opposed to, you know.
No, that's very helpful. Actually, it's helpful input. There have been a number of comments tonight that really are less for the provider than they are for the landlord, but those are important things to have in mind. And certainly construction is a big and onerous thing.
Yeah.
Shall we go to John Sanchez? I'm going to let this go till 9 o'clock. We've got 12
Sorry, Robert Manns, I think, is up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robert Manns.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for this next opportunity to communicate about the project and learn more about it. I'm at 31 West 11th Street, so next door. I just had a very practical question on the security and sort of signage and just how things will look from the street. So there were a number of presentations about, there will be security, CCTV, I think even metal detectors was mentioned somewhere, I'm not sure. But just how will the visibility of that security be from the street? I think there's a concern about too much visibility and it looking like a, policed facility as opposed to being a residential facility. Can you comment on how you would see that? Because in our call last week, there were some comments about maybe having somebody walking up and down the street 24 hours a day. It wasn't very clear. And the same goes for signage. Will this be looking like a residential building, or will there be signs about what it is and no loitering and this kind of thing, which I think would be, not great for either the neighbors nor the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
I'll kick this off and then hand it to Charlie Mulham, our Director of Security. I think, I was part of the call last week, and I'm just going to be honest and authentic here. I left with a little bit of a pin in my stomach because some of the requests were around having kind of an armed guard out front. And, the last thing we want to do as a nonprofit organization is criminalize the people who we serve. These are going to be women down on their luck. And I think part of it is what we want to make clear tonight is that we're going to have resources towards security. We're going to have protocols around effective monitoring and access control inside the building in terms of who's coming in. And we want to work with all of you in the form of a community advisory board collaboratively to figure out what else we need to do. And in some of the shelters we operate, sometimes there's an instinct for our clients to loiter outside, and we find that patrolling the block or the exterior of the building is helpful to break up loitering and bring people back or re-engage them towards the building, towards programming. And we have a lot of openness around what that looks like, and we want to be flexible. But we don't want to criminalize our clients. We don't want to presuppose that their motives are nefarious or that they're going to do bad things. This is largely speaking a group of women who are down on their luck. I think we as an organization are really lucky to have Charlie Mulham at the helm of our security. He's compassionate, he's open, he has long history in this field. He speaks the language of the security providers and contractors with whom we contract. And there ends up being a good synergy, but I think we're all about balance. And Charlie, do you have anything to add here?
Nothing other than am I unmuted? Yes.
You are, we can hear you.
Okay. Nothing other than there won't be an appearance from outside in any way that would look jail-like or whatever was described earlier. We don't have the design obviously finalized yet, but once it is, that will then kind of dictate how we formulate the positioning in the posts of the guards inside, how we illuminate the structure, how we have cameras positioned. But other than that, there won't be any negative appearance from the outside.
I'll add just one more thing.
Yeah.
The building is landmarked, so any exterior signage has to be in complete conformance with that. And it's not typical for us to have signage outside our buildings that separate them from what else is on the block anyway.
We actually have just 4 more people and we have 8 minutes. So let's see if we can get through them. Who's next, Adam?
John, you can go ahead. And as a reminder, let's try to keep questions to under a minute.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Good evening. My name is John Sanchez, and I'm the district manager of Bronx Community Board 6. And I'm on this call because I think with recent events, it shows us that we're all neighbors as New Yorkers, and viruses and pandemics don't know district boundaries. I also am aware that 2 project renewal sites are in my community board, the Fletcher Residence and Marsh's House. Both have been great neighbors and have served the LGBTQ community. It's called Marsh's House because it's named after one of your famous residents, Marsha P. Johnson. And I think Project Renewal does great work, and I recommend that the committee support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for bringing experience to this. Next.
Go ahead, Zachary Roberts.
Hi, I live in Community Board 2 on Bleecker Street, and I've lived on 14th Street and Elizabeth Street, also in the Community Board for about the past 10 years. I like to speak strongly in support of this project. Our board area is one of the most affluent in the city, and unfortunately, I think those areas have not done enough to do our part and support services like this in the past. And I think this is a great opportunity to help rectify that.
Thank you. Next.
Next up is Eleanor.
Eleanor,
you can unmute yourself. Yep.
Eleanor, can you unmute yourself?
All right. In the meantime, let's hear from Susan Myers.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah. Hi. Oh.
We'll listen to Eleanor first, and then we'll hear from Susan.
Okay. Thank you.
Eleanor, go ahead.
Thank you. So I live at West 11th Street, and while I'm very supportive of your project, I also would love to know how it is that we're going to have input on a pragmatic level. If I had understood Leilani Irvin's comments about the Community Advisory Board, it seemed that it was going to be convened after the shelter becomes operative. Is there any way for this to be developed earlier so that we can have input into the planning and the funding and the operations for the project? And also, what is there a way for this advisory board to have teeth so that we would be able to hold the shelter to its commitments? I believe there's a similar requirement for a community advisory board for housing works that was mentioned at the last hearing for this project.
Before you guys answer that, after Eleanor, we're going to have Susan Myers and then William Thomas, and that will be the last voice that we hear. So would you answer the question about when the community advisory board gets put together and what kind of input process there is before it does?
Sure, excellent question. So we can begin working on that community, identifying members to be a part of the CAB right away. In theory, when sites open up, traditionally, we meet on site. And so when I spoke about CABs and how they're formulated, typically when we all meet would be when the site opens up. However, we can begin that process right away and in terms of identifying who would be a part of that community advisory board. And we can also begin the conversation centered around some, things that was discussed on the call today for Project Renewal to maybe in DHS to consider making some new modifications and some changes to the site. But we can only do that with the input of community residents. And so I think we should get the ball rolling with identifying who those folks would be to be a part of the CAB. So I'm happy to start that as soon as possible.
And I presume that the CAB is actually an official body just once you guys are up and running, but I hope that we can invite you back to the community board to continue these conversations iteratively before, I mean, you've got 2 years before we're up and running, so we hope we'll have a lot more conversations about that.
Certainly.
Susan?
All right, Susan, you're up next.
Okay. I wanted to speak strongly in support of this project. I am the executive director of the New Shul, which is a small progressive synagogue that we have most of our programming at the First Presbyterian Church on 5th and 11th. And my community as a whole, I have brought this to them after conversations with Caden and Jody and Eric, who we all look forward to working with. We, as a local faith leader and speaking for my community, we embrace this project and hope that and look forward to working with the residents of this shelter in the future. I think very much in this current moment when we are reckoning with systemic injustices, it is our obligation really to enable low-income women, most of whom will be likely are of color, who are overrepresented in the city's homeless population, to find stability after experiencing the traumas of homelessness. And we look forward to being a program partner when the shelter is up and running.
Thank you so much, Susan. And our last voice, William Thomas.
Go ahead, William.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Beautiful. So hi, my name is William Thomas. I'm here as a representative of Open New York. We're an all-volunteer, independent, pro-housing organization. I live in the East Village, and I just wanted to quickly testify in support of the proposal. I just want to reemphasize, it's been said tonight, but CB2 has no homeless shelters, period. And I don't think it's fair or just that all homeless services are being segregated to other parts of the city, especially when it's so much easier to get to good paying jobs from CB2 compared to anywhere else in the city. You guys are so close to the financial district, Midtown. It's a great place to live. So I just want to ask that CB2 itself proactively embrace and support the shelter moving forward.
Thank you so much. Guys, it's 8:59. We did a great job. I want to thank everyone who participated. I really am grateful for, first of all, questions and concerns that are valid and that lend themselves to really being addressed in further conversations. And I also want to support personally the voices of support. Our community has a deep history of welcoming people, and we have become a very affluent district, one of the most affluent in the city. We're also, I think, 72% white. Personally, I look forward to opportunities for us to partner with you guys and to be able to not just have these women in our community, but to have them become part of our community. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I don't want to speak for others because this is my personal opinion, but I am very excited actually to see how many voices of support there have been, and how civil and respectful your questions have been, and how valid your concerns are. So I hope that we will reflect that in a resolution that we will write, and I thank you all for your time. If there's nothing else, I'm going to say goodbye to anyone who's ready to go, except for our committee, which has to stick around because we have to discuss this a little bit. Again, to those who attended who would like to submit any comments by email, you're welcome to do so. You're also welcome to stick around and listen to our conversation, although we won't be taking any more input. And I think that's it. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much to Project Renewal.
Thank you.
And being so well prepared and so responsive.
Thank you for having us. And if there's anyone who we will come before this body as frequently as you ask us. And if there's anybody who wants to meet individually, it would be our pleasure. Thank you for your time and your open-hearted consideration.
Yeah. I echo Project Renewal. I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you, and thank you to the board for extending this opportunity to us to present. Project Renewal was really eager to come before you all to speak. We wanted to come earlier, but COVID-19 hit. But here we are, and so just thank you for welcoming us. Also, just want to reiterate, I'm looking forward to connect with the community board and the elected officials to identify potential CAB members. And we'll continue to work in close partnership with the Speaker's office, Borough President's office, and all of the elected officials moving forward with this project to ensure all parties are on the same page as we move forward.
Great, and if anyone has any questions about the CAB or joining it or whatever, on the chat, Carter has put up the email address for CB2, which you can also find on the CB2 website, and you know, just stay in touch with us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so our committee. Let's hear what everyone has to say. I think that we should absolutely write a resolution about this because I think we should take a position, even though the process doesn't require a resolution from us. I think it's important for us to echo the voices of support that we've heard and to echo also the concerns that we've heard, especially because there's a lot of opportunity to work on this with Project Renewal. What do you guys want to think? What do you say? I talk a lot.
Well, I agree completely. It's Rachel. I'm sorry I came in a little late, but first of all, I'm very heartened by the comments that I heard tonight. I think a year ago we were hearing very different kinds of comments from people, and it's very nice to see this change. And yes, I'm just certainly support. I agree with both the comments that were worried about what might happen and the support for it that needs to happen. So yes, I'm in favor of writing a support.
Anybody else?
I agree completely. I think we should consider whether we want to include any of the specific concerns from the neighbors, specifically congregation, security presence, backyard space, backyard safety, smoking. Those were some of the top ones that came to mind, but it did sound like some of the residents had shared in similar concerns. So I'm not sure if we want our very supportive resolution to request that Project Renewal keep these things front of mind and have remediation or mitigation plans in place.
Also, I just got a text from Eric Botcher, who wanted us to know that he's been on the call the whole time. So it's wonderful that he's heard this input, both the voices of the support and the very legitimate expressions of concern. I agree, Adam. I think that our resolution should include the concerns in as much as we want to take a position, I think, in support of this. I think we also want to support the residents who are worried, that things not go south and that it be a really positive experience. Keen, did you want to say something? You're muted. How is it possible? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I did.
There you are.
I certainly agree. And it was very wonderful to hear. And, I think maybe our whole country has changed. And that's nice to hear. And I hope that our resolution has a very minor emphasis on the concerns, because the concerns were really more about the housing and the landlord, and they weren't, I think we have to make a very strong pro-Project Renewal statement, and we could have a sentence or two of, but concerns are raised.
Yeah. I think that the feeling we all had throughout the conversation was that none of these concerns were insurmountable. They were just, there are details that can be worked out. It's important for us to go on the record to point them out to Project Renewal. We don't want them to ignore them. But I agree that I too was so heartened to hear this, it made me proud of my neighborhood, because I always think of us as a really welcoming, more than accepting, but a place that has a big appetite for diversity and for getting to know all different kinds of people. And so I was very happy to hear that, especially from local residents. I mean, the people who live closest to this place. So it was really nice.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. I'm sorry, I was going to say I agree with everybody. I think we should write a nice supportive resolution and focus very little on the things that need to be worked on.
Yeah.
And also potentially in the resolution encourage CB2 employers to work with Project Renewal to try to get some of the jobs in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think I would also like to ask them to come back in a, you know, I don't know, in a 6 months, 4 months, I don't know, 5 months, whatever it is, because it's got to be iterative with the neighborhood as well. And the community advisory board is not really going to be up and running for, you know, until they start operations. All right, guys, it's 9:07.
I just wanted to add, I got a nice little email from Bonnie Slotnick who pointed out that this used to be a home for unwed mothers. She wrote her quote, "So woman's shelter is grandmothered in." So I thought that was
That's great. At least it wasn't a home for wayward women, which is a more offensive title once upon a time.
I don't think that I heard anybody opposed to this, just to be clear, right? All we heard were some of the concerns, which, and so I would agree with that, you know, the concerns and smoking issues. But, you know, these guys all run pretty good shelter programs, and it's something that we should highlight, you know, that we're fortunate to have good operators. The problem is that in most of our community, these facilities are too expensive to rent.
Exactly.
That's why we don't have them in our community, because these are all run with private partnerships.
I also think that, I don't know if Eric or Pat's still on the call, but I think that there were a lot of questions raised about the landlord himself. And I don't know if that's another conversation. I don't even know if that's a CB2 conversation or maybe, but there were a lot of concerns about the landlord and ongoing construction and stuff like this.
Most of the other SRO buildings like this have been converted into boutique hotels. And so we're very fortunate.
From the roof.
And that they've identified this location and they're using it. So it's great to see that use, because we've lost a lot of our lower priced affordable SROs from the past that have now become more expensive boutique hotels.
Right.
For example, the chain hotel, you know, is one that comes to mind. Marlton was an SRO.
Right.
There's a number of other ones as well.
So guys, I will write a resolution draft and I'll share it with all of you and get all your input, blah, 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 blah. And I will let you go. Yes, unless anyone has anything else they want to add. All right. Bye, Kathy. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Adam.
Yes.